Around 9 months ago, the greatest footballer of his generation, Sunil Chhetri, announced his retirement from international football. His last match in Kolkata was a wave of emotions, and along with it, there was a sense of anxiety. Who after Chhetri was a question on everyone's lips. This month, we got the answer. It is Chhetri himself. The former India captain dramatically returned to the national team for the Asian Cup qualifiers round 3, the last chance for India to make it to the continental tournament. And as much as jubilation, his comeback has set the alarm bells ringing for Indian football. Welcome to Express Sports Podcast. You're listening to Game Time with me, Mihir, Vasavda and Amit Kamath. And today, we discuss why one of India's greatest players of all time selection to the national team is bad news for Indian football. Amit, we haven't discussed Indian football for a while, and I think every time we seem to talk about it, it's not been too rosy a picture in the last year or two. And it isn't the case today as well. What was your reaction जब Sunil Chhetri का news आया that he's been picked for the Asian Cup qualifiers?
The temptation would be to compare him to Shahid Afridi in a sense. But then I think that would be unfair on Sunil. Why? Because I think he's just been dragged out of retirement. I think somebody from AIFF just turned up at his door with a very sad story and like a drooping face and said, "Bhai, please वापस आ जाओ. हम आपके बिना रह नहीं सकते." Or whatever it is that mushy Bollywood ये हुआ होगा, where they convinced him that he was... I mean, obviously, it's not as if he's completely given up, right? He's still playing with Bengaluru FC. So it's not as if he had completely stopped playing. But even by that standards, this is a little strange. Like, obviously, we are going to get into how terrible a signal this sends for the rest of the world that Indian football does not have a successor yet. But the numbers, if you look at Mihir, I think they speak for themselves. You look at the 4 games that Team India has played under Manolo Marquez, and I think we've scored 2 goals in a sense.
2 goals, yeah. 2 goals.
2 goals. And since he's retired, I think in the 5 games that India have played, India have won 0. Which kind of explains why they had to get him back from retirement. But then it also begs the question, what were you doing so far? I mean, it's not as if Sunil Chhetri's retirement came out of the blue, right? I mean, you could have maybe seen it coming for a few years. Didn't you kind of plan for this sort of an eventuality?
Absolutely, Amit. Ekdam spot on hai ye point, because I mean the whole fuss is, the only reason is because Chhetri is now 40 years old. Even if he comes out of retirement now, it's वो मतलब एक बहुत ही quick fix, short-sighted solution है. And we're talking about matches against Bangladesh. I mean, the whole qualifying campaign starts against Bangladesh, but before that, India faced Maldives. So Maldives on March 19, and then the third round Asian Cup qualifying match against Bangladesh on March 25. These are the 2 matches in March window. It's a testimony to Chhetri in a way. Nothing to take away from him, that even at 40, he continues to play better than all Indian strikers who are in the ISL, in the I-League, in other divisions of Indian football. Stats अगर जो हम थोड़ा थ्रो करें तो he scored 12 goals this season, the highest Indian goal scorer. The other 2 are Bryson Fernandes. He is, I think, must be 23, I'm guessing. He's a Goan. Again, his preferred position is central midfield. So we are talking of a player who is not a recognized striker as Chhetri is. And then the other Indian player who's scored pretty well is a defender, Subhashish Bose. So it's mind-boggling that we've had another season where no Indian strikers are scoring goals. And worryingly enough, if you're an Indian football fan, very few Indian strikers are getting game time, which is the crux of the whole argument, isn't it, Amit?
Mir, it is kind of fitting, no? Because if you remember the way the ISL started many years back, it started with all these franchises bringing superstars to helm their forward lines. You had somebody like a David Trezeguet, you had somebody like a Freddie Ljungberg, all of these guys, right? And it was, obviously now we don't have those kind of yesteryear stars that are being asked to helm or being asked to lead the strike forces of teams. But then you still have considerable money being spent on strikers to lead the lineups of...
Amit, I for a second thought that you're going to say that the ISL formula was now being adopted by the national team, where they've called I hate to call Chhetri a yesteryear striker, but well, a 40-year-old striker for the national team.
I mean, वही तो formula use कर रहा है अभी basically. Get in somebody who everybody was very, very whatever enamored by. जैसे I think Arsenal fans were very enamored by Pires and Ljungberg and all of these guys.
Yeah.
And they were the top stars in ISL 1. So right now, I guess you can say that that's the model that the Indian football team has, in a sense, applied. But Mihir, since you are somebody who's covered football a whole lot, obviously, would we say that we kind of got lucky with Chhetri in a sense when he arrived as he did, right on the heels of Bhutia, but that luck has kind of run out after Chhetri?
I mean, yes and no. If you look at the years when Chhetri was playing, there were enough red flags all through. Chhetri rose to become India's highest goal scorer of all time. 94 goals, I think, is what his tally is. 20 years ago, he made his debut for India, quite crazily. It was in Pakistan that he played his first match for India. And it was very seamless, the transition. When Bhutia played the last time at the Asian Cup in 2011, the national team never missed him, because Chhetri was ready, and alongside Chhetri there were quite a few other forwards who looked promising, JJ Lalpe-Klua being one of them. So there was one target man, there was this one person who the entire team looked up to, and then around him there were other players who would play a perfect support role. India haven't had that for the better part of the last 10 years, and every time the national team was in trouble, it was Chhetri who stepped up and rescued it, be it against very lowly oppositions or against big teams. आप किसी के सामने भी छेत्री को खिला दो, वो गोल मार के इंडिया को बचा ही लेता था हमेशा. Fair and square, I think the blame lies at the door of the ISL franchisees, the AIFF. 10 years, 12 years is a good enough time to judge a league, and ISL was launched in 2014 with this very big show and great fanfare, saying that they'll, in 10 years' time change the face of Indian football. And here we are, bringing back the old face of Indian football. So I don't think anything has changed. We can maybe, try to get some of our old episodes back, if it's not a tough ask, to analyze, where we've analyzed the whole problem, the multiple problems that Indian football face. But Amit, the biggest problem is the way ISL teams are structured. And I think we can talk a little about that, simply because the way teams are picked and everything, there is very little scope for Indian strikers to make a name for themselves.
And Mihir, I think, to be fair, I'm not sure how much we can blame ISL franchises in a sense. Because, see, I would understand their point as well. Because if you look at it that way, they are all at the end of the day businesses. They are all there to make money. So if you tell them that you can only pick, 4 foreigners in the 11, why wouldn't you want a striker to be one of them? I mean, solving Indian football's team's problem is something that the Indian football team's management and the coach should do. I don't know how much of it, the responsibility lies on the doors of the franchises itself, right? I mean, just try and give another example, right? If tomorrow the Indian cricket team does not have an opener, does the blame lie on IPL franchises, where we tell the franchises that you guys should consider playing more Indian openers because only Yashasvi and Shubman hai, but then if one of them gets injured, we don't have any other opener. We do. I mean, right now we have more than them. But I'm just saying, Mihir, maybe I don't know.
I'll disagree with this point, Amit, for a simple reason, because the way football is structured, right? Mm-hmm. It is the clubs that feed players. Unlike many other sports, यहाँ पर system थोड़ी सी उल्टी है. For 8 out of the 12 months or 9 out of the 12 months in a year, the players are with their clubs, and then during international windows for a week or 10 days, they're released by the clubs. They go play for the national team and come back to where they are. So in that sense, it becomes the club's responsibility to shape a player's career. The question then is enough being done on that front? Again, I understand the clubs, पहला उनका priority रहेगा to win their matches. So वो वहाँ पर social service करने नहीं बैठे हैं, and they'll prefer to have better foreign players instead of better Indian players. I don't think they even look at, in many cases, they don't even look at the nationality. As long as the player is good, they'll give a chance. So clearly Indian players are not good enough. वहाँ पर I think AIFF can step in, wherein, I mean, हम इंडिया को कंपेयर नहीं कर सकते with what happens in Europe or in the developed parts of Asia, footballing sense में. हम वो कंपेयर नहीं कर सकते बिकॉज द रोल ऑफ अ डोमेस्टिक लीग इन इंडिया एज फार एज आई अंडरस्टैंड और एटलीस्ट एज आई इमेजिन इज टू फर्स्ट डेवलप और सपोर्ट द नेशनल टीम. इंडिया में वेरी फ्यू पीपल एक्चुअली केयर अबाउट द डोमेस्टिक लीग. अंधेरी स्पोर्ट्स कॉम्प्लेक्स के बाहर खड़े रह के पूछिए कि यहाँ पर कौन सी टीम खेल रही है एंड देयर आर गुड चांसेस दैट 9 out of 10 people might not know that Mumbai City play their home matches there. So people don't care about the national. Chhetri himself
रणबीर कपूर का टीम खेल रहा है is the normal answer that you could expect, I would assume.
But even if the people say that, I'll be happy because that would mean कि उन्हें पता है कि मुंबई सिटी का ओनर कौन है ना? तो I'll be pleasantly surprised if they know that too. Chhetri himself had to kind of plead with fans with folded hands कि आप national team को देखने आइए जब ये टीम बॉम्बे में खेल रही थी. And Bombay is a bad example for any sporting events except cricket these days. But that was the situation. I digress right now. But मेरा कहने का point इसमें ये है कि like you said कि Indian cricket team में अगर जो कोई अच्छे openers नहीं आ रहे हैं, I'm sure at some point questions will be raised of Ranji Trophy teams कि आप क्या कर रहे हो? Ranji Trophy से क्यों कोई talent निकल के नहीं आ रहा? And ISL plays a very similar role over here where it is their responsibility, clubs ka responsibility to ensure that there are good players coming through the system. And the system, of course, overall, the responsibility is with the AIFF and Football Sports Development Limited, which is this complicated joint venture of multiple parties that also controls Indian football. So, एक तरह से खिचड़ी है, तो it's not surprising कि हम ये situation पे आ गए हैं.
Right. Mihir, I also obviously wanted to understand this because you've followed this sport microscopically for over a decade, almost 15 years now. So, we used to have these concepts like the pylon arrows at some point, which became like a developmental team. Do these teams still exist? What has happened to these teams? Are there players still being groomed by AIFF in a sense? Away from that traditional structure of under 14, under 17, whatever age group teams, are there these teams that still exist in Indian football? Has the experiment in a sense been abandoned now?
Experiment has been abandoned. Not just the teams, in fact, the academies too.
Right.
AIFF ran their academies, which was a great idea, but AIFF has perennially been a cash-strapped organization, so they couldn't sustain it. And it's surprising because, it was a very good idea on paper. You saw results of it in the short term. So the academies didn't work out. Because the academies didn't work out, उन्होंने थोड़ा सा pyramid को invert करने की कोशिश की, wherein आप normal circumstances में आप नीचे से शुरुआत करते हैं to build a solid foundation. यहाँ पर उन्होंने फिर ऊपर से शुरुआत की and then they got, I'm sure we all remember the under-17 World Cup.
Yeah.
जो मतलब इतना ridiculous सा idea था क्योंकि आपके पास डंक के 30 under-17 players nahi the. India on merit had never qualified for that tournament. Suddenly you're hosting the World Cup. You put all your money and energy in grooming those 30 players. And out of those 30 players, we're talking about players in single digits who have gone on to make a successful career. So that program has also failed. So of course, the question is that what will work? There have been plenty of studies independently done by football mad people in the country. And they've looked at geography and it's simple कि आप हर जगह मत देखिए talent के लिए. You look at pockets, you focus on those pockets and maybe try from there. I'm sure it's not a simple solution as that, but there has to be a solution to this because Chhetri will retire once again. If not after 1 year, then maybe after another 5 years because Benjamin Button जैसी उसकी aging है. And after that, you're going to face the same question. And at 50, I'm pretty sure Chhetri won't come back out of retirement again.
Never say never, yaar. मतलब क्या पता?
That's true.
Chhetri might probably still be have to revoke his retirement once more. But ये हमारा sleeping giant that is the Indian football वो कुंभकर्ण ही रहेगा, I guess.
But Amit, I wanted to ask you because see, again, it's a थोड़ा सा professional hazard, right? Where all of us who cover a particular sport, हम थोड़ा सा उसमें खो जाते हैं and then we also are kind of disconnected with the reality outside. You've seen enough football to form a very informed opinion on the current state of affairs. But now when you talk in your circle, when you stay very close to the Mumbai City stadium as well, do you sense any buzz left in Indian football? Because my worry is that football, which arguably was the number 2 sport in India in terms of followers, say 10 years ago, 15 years ago after cricket, that position has been taken over by many other sports, chess primarily being one. Badminton has increased by leaps and bounds. And I mean, हम लोग detail में और जा सकते हैं, but these are the 2 sports that come straight to my mind.
Mir, I have a very simple explanation, right? I think I could be wrong, but I believe at some point even Sunil Chhetri said this, that the reason why there is a problem in Indian football is that tomorrow, let's say today, right now, if there is Indian football on my screen, are you getting enough? Forget about what footfall you get at Andheri Sports Complex or any of the other stadiums, right? We know that if there is a match in Kolkata, there will be a lot of people coming. We know that if there is a match in, like, let's say Kerala or Goa, there'll be a lot of people coming. But away from that, away from those little pockets in this vast country that we call India, let's say there is a football match happening between Mohun Bagan and East Bengal, the biggest rivalry in Indian football, right? If tomorrow that match is happening, I know the names might have changed and all of that, but if when that match was also happening back in its glory days, how many people were actually watching it on television? Not many. There is a reason why. I believe Sunil Chhetri spoke about this. The fact is, when I look at that product, that seemed like a product being played out on my television screen on 0.5 speed. I would rather watch a Premier League, even if, let's say, I don't support any team. I would rather watch it because it is much faster, because it looks like a polished product, as opposed to Indian football where there are like 10 passes and the 11th pass is like a frustrating long ball which goes outside. Even if I have played a little bit of football, I would not watch that. There is no aspiration to be, or there is no inspiration to be gained out of watching that kind of football, right? In other sports you mentioned, right? If I'm watching chess because at the end of the day, if I have played even a little bit of chess, I look at somebody like a Gukesh, a Prag, Arjun Ergyasi and say, wow, I could have been that. Or my kid could be that. I don't think anybody looks at Indian football and thinks that, except for maybe little pockets in the Northeast, in Goa or something like that. Because as I said, the product, I don't want to call it inferior, but it just seems like a very slower version of what you can get at the same amount, at the same price, at the same time on another channel. And that, I think, is the biggest problem of Indian football. You are not able to get eyeballs because the product that you are putting out for consumers is maybe not at par with the best that they can get with just a flick of a button.
No, I completely agree with you on this point, and that's the reason I go back to what we were talking earlier about the responsibilities of the clubs and why even for them to exist, like पूरा existential crisis वाला ही scene है ये. For them to exist, it's important that the national team plays well and wins. That hasn't happened in a while, and the clubs need to realize कि India एक footballing sense में weird country है where unless the national team does well, even if they're winning an inconsequential tournament, like say for example a couple of years ago when Igor Stimac was the coach, India won this thing called Intercontinental Cup on the bigger international platform. No one cares about what Intercontinental Cup is. Intercontinental भी नहीं है वो कप. कोई आप 3 countries को लाए और इंडिया में खिलाए और आपने उसको Intercontinental Cup बोल दिया है. But India won that and it created this, very positive feeling towards the national team. And उसका जो residual effect जो है वो clubs ही eventually उसे feel करने वाले हैं. So from that point of view, there has to be a strategy. I'm not saying कि everyone should कल से आप इंडियन स्ट्राइकर से खिला दो, वैसे तो नहीं हो सकता है. वी हैव टू बी प्रैक्टिकल, बट देयर हैज टू बी अ सॉल्यूशन. नाउ इफ यू लुक एट द करंट सिनेरियो, इंडिया की सिचुएशन ऐसी है दैट द नेशनल टीम कोच मनोलो मार्केज इज आल्सो इन द कॉन्फ्लिक्ट ऑफ इंटरेस्ट ऑफ ऑल कॉन्फ्लिक्ट ऑफ इंटरेस्ट, आल्सो द कोच ऑफ एन आईएसएल टीम, एफसी गोवा. And if you look at the last match that Goa won, I think earlier this month, they beat Mohammedan Sporting. That was the last win. They lost again uske baad a couple of days ago to Mohun Bagan. But in both those matches, Manolo Marquez, who is the national team coach, who's struggling to find a striker, has been playing a foreigner in those positions. So agar jo the national team coach himself isn't trusting the players at his club, and you would assume the players at his club are good enough because otherwise he wouldn't select them, if he's not feeling the need to play them at his club, तो फिर तो नेशनल टीम का कैसे ही कुछ होगा. सो ये इकोसिस्टम का इतना बड़ा मेस है ये दैट देयर इज नो quick fix to this. It's great कि short term में Chhetri will come, he'll perhaps score a few wonderful goals, he'll lift the morale of the team, which badly is needed in Indian football right now because it's going through one of its most toughest negative emotion wise phases, and Chhetri will bring in that feel good factor, but आपको long term एक इसमें strategy करनी होगी, ऐसे तो नहीं चलेगा.
Right. Mir, just wanted to understand, since you do follow the ISL very closely, what do we expect from Chhetri when the game against Maldives comes around and we see him in the playing 11? Considering, as you said, he is, I think, the top scoring Indian player, at least in the ISL right now. What do we expect from him when he hits the pitch again? And obviously, the last question I want to ask is, are there any players that you see taking up his, trying to fill in his boots? I mean, I know there is a long list. There is Lalian Zulala. Obviously, there are other players. But do you see anybody fit enough to be groomed into that big hole, Sunil Chhetri size hole?
Honestly speaking, we shouldn't be looking at ISL right now because if there were players good enough to fill his boots, then Chhetri wouldn't have been recalled to the national team. So the question is what's happening at the junior level. अब junior level पे हम मतलब कभी-कभी hype में फंस जाते हैं, कभी-कभी transition जो होता है from junior to senior, that doesn't happen smoothly. So we don't know the answer to it right now. अभी तो ऐसा कोई promising player तो लग नहीं रहा है जिससे हमें मतलब ऐसा feel हो कि there is a succession plan. So that's, unfortunately, there is no answer to who after Chhetri wala question right now. And as far as what to expect from Chhetri, I think goals is the most obvious thing because if he returns to the national team and doesn't score, then the coach Manolo Marquez will be a very unhappy man because he's stirred up a hornet's nest by bringing in Chhetri. And I mean, I'm blown away by how Chhetri has played this season because I, to be honest, expected कि after retiring from the national team, shayad it was a thing कि this would be his last season in the ISL. He would play very as a guest appearance kind of roles and everything. But he's played a lot. On an average, he's played around 70-75 minutes in every match he's played this season, scored 12 goals, a couple of assists. He's always been in and around the opposition's box. So, that's a big plus because India hasn't had a player who actually gets into the box. तो आपके पास एक टारगेट मैन जैसा एक आदमी बन जाता है. इट्स गुड न्यूज. ऑफ कोर्स देयर इज नो हाइडिंग दैट द नेक्स्ट 2 मैचेस मालदीव्स एंड बांग्लादेश, एंड हमें मतलब मालदीव्स और बांग्लादेश ये सोचकर डिसमिस नहीं करना चाहिए कि अरे ये क्या नेशंस है. फॉर इंडिया दीज आर द काइंड ऑफ कंट्रीज जिन्हें हम हराने में थोड़ी सी मुश्किल होती है. सो इफ यू बीट देम, यू स्टार्ट द क्वालिफाइंग कैंपेन फॉर द फाइनल राउंड ऑन अ पॉजिटिव नोट, एंड देन if everything goes well, you qualify for the Asian Cup once again, which is the most important thing. But again, it comes with a big star mark.
Right. Mihir, just one last thing I wanted to ask, and before I tell you a story from one of my way back days of when I used to cover the ISL, but I just wanted to know, Mihir, see, Indian football has tried pretty much a whole lot of things over the last decade or so to try and fix this exact problem that now they are trying to put a band-aid with the inclusion of Sunil Chhetri. Clearly, none of them have worked. They've tried the whole Indian Arrows wala gambit. They've tried the whole under-17 wala team race karna from scratch, send them to all sorts of exposure trips. And as you said, single digits mein those players have made it to teams, I guess. They've tried all sorts of things. They have like a 6-player or 5-player whatever quota in a sense, or I think 3 players quota in the playing 11. All of that is there. What is the solution then to fixing a problem where you don't have to plead with Sunil Chhetri and bring him out of retirement again for the 3rd time maybe in 5 years time?
Acceptance, I think, कि आपने गलती की है. Acceptance that your players right now, I mean, all due respect to each one of them, but they aren't good enough at this stage. नहीं है, आप मान लीजिए वो. Players also, those who were promising, got too comfortable in the cozy, cushioned environment in India. अच्छे खासे पैसे मिलते हैं आपको mediocrity में रहने के लिए in India, so आप aspire नहीं करते to go outside India and play. Because if you look at, say, someone like Baichung Bhutia, Sunil Chhetri and Gurpreet Singh Sandhu, the 3 players in the last 20 years who have gone outside India and had a substantial stint. ऐसा नहीं कि आप वहां पर बेंच पे बैठ के आ गए. You've seen that they've always been a cut above the rest and they've set the standard in what they do. So from a player's point of view, I think आप short term के लिए salary और वो सब थोड़ा सा sacrifice करके if you are willing to invest 3 years, 4 years of your early careers by playing abroad, it's a start. From the franchisee's point of view, there has to be a genuine attempt to produce players, and not kind of have those dikhave wale grassroots programs. And from the federation point of view, acceptance that they messed up. The last 10 years were a mistake. कि ISL जिस तरह से लॉन्च हुआ और ट्रैम्पल और पूरा डिसरप्ट करा इंडियन फुटबॉल सिस्टम को, it's been a failure. Else Chhetri wouldn't have been coming out of retirement right now. So there has to be that acceptance and then have a fresh start, hoping कि अगले 10 साल में आप एक ऐसे पोजीशन में पहुंच जाओगे जहां पर at least you'll start competing against your regional rivals in Asia and then think about कोई आगे की चीजें.
Right. Mihir, just one small tiny tale before we wrap this up. Okay. In one of the first earliest seasons when the ISL had just started, it was brand new. मतलब वो plastic भी नहीं उतरा था उसके shiny body से. तो वो time पे I remember talking to a foreign footballer who had played a few games with the Indian players, and I remember asking him, what is the problem of Indian players? I mean, is it genes? Is it physical attributes? What is it? So the guy locked eyes with me and told me, listen, this is off the record. I don't want to say this on the record. But then he said, listen, when I played in the foreign leagues, whatever league it was, when I'm making a run, he used to be a forward. So he said, when I'm making a run, I'm looking back, there is a teammate running next to me on another flank or slightly behind me. I make eye contact with him. That eye contact is a sign to that player that you have to release the ball right now, not 5 minutes later, not after you tried to dribble 20 people and then lost the ball anyway. That's eye contact is a very, very simple sign that you have to release the ball right now. He was like, every time I would make eye contact with a teammate, that guy, even after having this conversation with them, they would say, okay, I understand. They would make eye contact. Then they would nevertheless try and dribble past 5 different players anyway and lose the ball. And the run that I have made all the way, I'm like standing in handshaking distance with the goalkeeper. And there is nothing for me to do there. So he was like, I spent a lot of my game time just doing these futile runs for no reason. And eventually what happens is you are like, okay, this boy is never going to pass to me. I'm going to give up. So wo little bit of Preeti Sabarwal and Komal Chautala wala thing, I guess, was coming in. That's my little very
eye contact में तो अपने players तो मतलब कोई ऐसा दूसरा ही थोड़ा सा मशी tangent पे ही चले जाते रहेंगे mentally, क्या पता. But before we start making more bad jokes, I think we should call it a day. काफी हमने rant कर लिया, काफी we got our गुस्सा off our chest, Amit, today.
This is our weekly therapy session in a sense.
Yeah, it is. But having said all that, I'm actually looking forward to watching India play because at least अभी हमें पता है कि कुछ तो मजा आएगा देखने में. So let's see. Maldives on March 18th and Bangladesh on March 25 for anyone interested. और उससे पहले वाला जो नहीं, आई थिंक उसके बाद ही March 18 सैंडविच में जो वीकेंड आएगा तो उसमें आप थोड़ा सा गेम टाइम भी सुन लीजिए. अमित, मी एंड विनायक विल बी बैक. IPL स्टार्ट हो रहा है, ऑल इंग्लैंड बैडमिंटन चैंपियनशिप है, काफी कुछ. सो वील सी व्हाट टू डिस्कस. दिस इज मी मिहिर एंड अमित विद मी सेइंग गुड बाय एंड होप यू हैड अ गुड होली वीकेंड.
You were listening to Express Sports by the Indian Express. This week's show was edited and mixed by Suresh Pawar and produced by me, Shashank Bhargav. If you like the show, then do subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. You can also recommend the show to someone you think will like it. Share it with a friend or someone in your family. It's the best way for people to get to know about us. You can also tweet us at Express Podcasts and write to us at podcasts@indianexpress.com.